Today we're going to be discussing the revision process and some tips on how to revise. So first of all, there's a difference between revision and editing. Sometimes they get used interchangeably, but however there's a difference. A revision is an in-depth substantial changes to the idea, structure, or purpose of the paper. That includes adding or removing a whole paragraph, introducing new research, or adding new viewpoints and evidence. Those are the large scale changes to the paper. Editing is basically just fixing those surface errors. So grammar, spelling, punctuation, a little bit of organization. So moving paragraphs around, correcting spelling or citations, fixing awkward phrasing, or changing format and fonts. So typically you do editing after you do the large scale revisions. So for revision strategies, play devil's advocate, which basically you kind of identify points lacking substantial support, while also consider the opposing viewpoint. So really thinking about, are there certain assumptions that you're making in your paper where you are assuming that the audience knows what you're talking about whenever they might not be, or if you're making a specific argument and you don't have all the information to support that argument, this would be a time that you put it in. However, and always consider, the person that's thinking the opposite of you. You need to make your argument strong enough to where they kind of can't have an opposition. You defy their opposition. So next, really to consider your audience. So with a defined audience, you're able to focus your points, whether that be generalized, whether it be your specific professor. How much knowledge do they have in the field that you're discussing. Once you know that, it really kind of allows you to hone in on how detailed you need to be or how broad you need to be. And then also discuss your ideas with others. So get people to ask you questions. The more you know, the stronger the paper. This is a good point where you get family members to read it, or friends, or go to a tutor, go to your professor. If somebody reads your paper and they have a question, that means you didn't offer enough support. That's the easiest fix to any paper, is that if you have somebody that asks you a question, that means you didn't answer it in your paper, and that's what you need to do. For editing strategies, it's really important, read your work aloud. It's really awkward, I know, but reading it aloud breaks your brain from jumping to where we know what we wrote, but our brains know what we wrote, but when you read it aloud, it kind of breaks that, so that you can catch the awkward words and phrases. You can also read the essay backwards. So a lot of times our brains, we kind of just skip over a lot of the issues because we know what we're trying to say. But if you read the essay backwards, you don't have any pre-existing understanding of what you're writing. You take it sentence by sentence rather than thought by thought. And that way you can see if a specific sentence has issues without knowing, without thinking about what happened in the sentence prior to that. Get somebody else to read your paper, friend, professor, parent, tutor, anybody. Depending on who your audience is, that might kind of change who you get who to read your paper. So if you're writing to your professor, it might be best to let your professor read it. If you're writing to a generalized audience, having your friend read it. If you're doing a capstone paper, having somebody else in capstone read it so that they have an idea of the scientific background that is needed to understand what's happening in the paper. It all depends on who your audience is. Also, take breaks. Our brains can only take so much. After you sit at a computer for so long, you really should get up, walk around, move, let your brain take a break. Otherwise, you just kind of get boggled down. And a lot of times, if you take a break, come back and reread the paper, and that break could be a day. You come back and reread it, you'll actually create new arguments and kind of really make the paper a lot better. Read the paper on the computer and in print. Our eyes play nasty little tricks on us that, if we just read the paper on the computer, we jump. Our eyes don't actually see as well on the computer as it does on paper. And so read it on the paper too, and if you read it on the paper, you can actually write on it. You can circle things and make little notations that you can't really do on a computer. And then also, go to the office hours to see a writing tutor. Really getting your professor to look at your papers, they want to help. So do writing tutors. You guys have the resources that you need. Just go and see a professor. They're more than willing to help you. So those are my tips and strategies of how to take on papers once you've written the first draft. So I hope that helps.